Hey everyone, welcome to another Lettuce Garden video where we are going to go over how to make an automatic sliding door for your Roblox game. So by the end of the video, I'll show you here, when you walk up to a door, it will open, and when you walk away, it will automatically close. And we'll talk about ways to make this more optimized, how to make the animations more smooth, and also ways that we can copy and paste this door throughout our game, but only have to update one script. So all of that is coming up. So just to start us off, I want to go over what we have here in front of us. So we have a very simple model here of an automatic door and some walls. So if we take a closer look, really what we have here, we have two separate bricks representing a left and right portion of our door. So we have a left part and a right part. And ultimately what we want to happen is when the player walks up to the door, we want the door to open. So let's talk a little bit about how we can do this. So if we take this green rectangle here to be our door, and we can have some purple players spread around the map. Basically what we want to do is when one of these purple players, approaches our door, the door opens and they can continue walking right through. So how do we detect if one of these purple players is actually close to our door? So what we'll have to do is we have to check the distance between our players. So, we can do a distance check between each of our players. And we can say, if one of our players falls within some radius around our door, we can open the door. So if we have one of our players here who happens to be found right here, which is within our radius, then we want to open the door. So let's look at how we can check the player distances from our door in the code. So to get started, let's create a new script within our automatic door folder. And so the first thing we want to do is we want to create a reference to our door, which in this case is just our script.parent. And to check the distances between all the players in the game, what we can do is we can create a while loop, so while true do. And right off the bat, we want to make sure that we're adding in a wait. If you don't add in a wait in your while true do loops, or any other sort of yielding, you are going to crash your studio. So you want to make sure you add in at least a task.wait here. For our purposes, it's not super important that we check, multiple times, like say 30 times a frame. It's not super important. So I think if we can wait maybe like 0.2 seconds between each check, so that still lets us check the distances 5 times a second, which I think is more than enough for a door system. So to check the distances between every player in the game, what we want to do is we want to get a list of all the players. And we can get that from the player service. But in order to access the players, we have to actually import it first. So up here, local players equals game, get service players. And so this gives us a table of the players. So let's loop through this table. So for player in players do. And so how do we check the distance? Now Roblox gives us a really nice method for checking distance. Local distance player distance from character. I just noticed a small typo here. We want to make sure that on line 8 here we're using a lowercase p. And so for this distance from character, we have to add in we have to give it a position or a point in the world. So we want to say Roblox, give us the distance from the character from this position. And so the position we want to give it is our door position. So, well, what are we going to use in our door to give Roblox that information? And what we can do is we can actually use something called the pivot. So if you come up to the view model, or the view tab, sorry, and click on our door and click edit pivot, you'll see that there's this blue dot that we can move around. And this essentially just defines the point on our model where pivots like rotations would happen and translations are based off of and all that. That's not too important for this video. What is important is to know that we can access that pivot position within our code. So what we want to do is first we want to get the pivot. So we can do local pivot equals door get pivot. And this gives us a C-frame. So C-frames have position and rotational information, but we only need the position information. So let's just pull out the position information, pivot.position, and now it passes us through to our distance check. Now, something that's very important to note here with this distance from character method is if the character doesn't exist, it will always return 0. So if your character, for example, jumps off the edge of your map and gets deleted, and it's waiting that couple of seconds until it respawns, your character doesn't actually exist in those couple of seconds. So this method will return 0. And this is an issue because if the distance is 0, the system is going to think the player is basically standing on top of the door and it will open. So in order to prevent this issue, what we first need to do is we need to make sure the character actually exists in the world. So we can do local character equals player.character. And if the character does not exist, so if not character, then continue. And basically, if the character doesn't exist, it will just continue and go to the next player. And so now we can check to see if the player is within some radius that we've set. So going back to our diagram, this red circle represents the radius around our door. So we want to check to make sure, we want to check to see if there's a player within the radius. Now, so we do the check on all the players until we find one that's within the radius, right? So we go through our players, none of these players are within our radius. Then we hit this player, and this player is in our radius. So when we detect that player, that's when we want to open the door. Now I'm going to present you with a slightly different situation where maybe we have a player here, and so we're doing our distance checks. Player 1 isn't in range, player 2 is not in range, but player 3 is in range. Now, because we know player 3 is in range, we no longer need to check any of these players because we know that there's at least one person within range, which means the door should be open. So let's implement this logic into our code here. So if the distance is less than some radius that we're going to set, then we want to open the door. So first, let's set our radius constant up here to be, 20 is a bit large, maybe 10 studs. And if distance is less than radius, let's print open the door. So quick recap before we test. We get a list of players, we're going through the players, making sure the character exists before we get the distance from the pivot point of our door, which we grab up here. And if the distance is less than our radius, we want to open the door. For now, we're just going to print it so that we can debug and test. So let's hop in here to a quick test. And when we walk up to the door, we should see in the log in the bottom left, the print should appear. So yep, so now that we're up near the door, we get a print saying open the door. So how do we actually now open the door? So we can use tweens. I think that's as a first place most people's brains will go here. And what tweens are is a pretty simple way to animate. We can just say, hey Roblox, I want the new C-frame of this door to be right here. And I want you to smoothly animate it for me. And Roblox does it quite nicely. So let's use tweens. It's super easy to use and they work really well in this situation. Now something that's really important to note with tweens is if you are tweening on the server, it's going to look very choppy for your players. So what we want to do is we want to tween on the client. And general rule of thumb with Roblox is all animation should be on the client. So how do we do that? First, let's create a script, a new script with an automatic door. And we're going to set the run context of our new script to be client. And let's just name these scripts so that we aren't getting confused here. So door client is our client script. Door server is our server script. And let's just double check the contents to make sure we named everything properly. Looks good. Looks like we did that. And so here we want to say open the door. Let's write the open the door logic and closing the door logic, and then we'll connect it to the server. So first, let's create a function here called open door. And so we talked about using tweens. So in order to use tweens, we have to import tween service. And so we want to tween. So let's create a new tween. Okay, so let's think about this a little bit. So what we have to do is we have to move our door parts out. We want to move that part over there and this part over there. So let's analyze our bricks here a little bit. So we have a folder here called door parts with our left and right doors within it. And if I right click on that and click show orientation indicator, we can see that the front part of our door, the front face, is facing this way, and top is with the green arrow pointing up. So given that information, moving the door this way is the same thing as moving the door to the left for this part. So the more left we move the door, the more in the wall it is. And this is our right door. And then if we come over to our left door and show orientation indicator, it's facing the same way, and we want to move this door to the right. So in our code then, we want to make sure that we're moving our left door. Give it a tween info. And we're going to set it, and we want to set the C-frame to the right. So how do we do this? So first we need to get the initial C-frame of our left door. So local initial left door C-frame equals left door dot C-frame. Now we haven't defined left door yet, so let's first define left door. So first let's define our door parts folder. So that'd be door wait for child, door parts. Now we haven't defined door, so let's define door equals script dot parent. And our left door is door wait for child left, and our right door is door wait for child right. Small typo, I meant to actually say the left door is part of door parts and right door is part of door parts as well. And the reason why we're using wait for child is because, if your game has streaming enabled, some of these parts might not be available right away. So we want to make sure we're waiting for them to become available before we try to do stuff with them. So that's something, it's not really a concern on the server so much, but on the client, it's really important that we're waiting for things. And while we're here too, let's create an initial right door C-frame. I did not spell it right. And that is right door dot C-frame. And so now that let's come back to our open door function. We want to move our door, like we said, to the right. So let's take our initial left door C-frame and then move it 5 studs to the right. And so when we're doing the C-frame.new method of movement, the axes here are X, Y, and Z. And positive numbers move in the right, negative numbers move in, to the left. So for our right door, let's create another tween for right door, tween info.new. And we want to set its new C-frame to be right. Based off the initial right door C-frame, And then we want to move this -5 so that it moves to the left. And right before we test this out, let's make sure that we're playing our animation. So make sure you call the play method on your animations. And then we also have to make sure we're actually calling this open door method. So maybe for testing purposes, let's wait 5 seconds and then call open door. So if we play this now, after 5 seconds, we'll see the door open. Awesome. It was a nice smooth tween animation, and it did exactly what we wanted it to do. So let's quickly implement a close door function. And for this, we can pretty much just copy and paste what we did for open door and just rename it to be closed door and just remove the extra C frames. So we want to set the C frames back to the initial C frames that we initially had. So after we open the door for testing purposes, let's wait 2 seconds and call closed door. So after 5 seconds, our door will open. And then 2 seconds later, it will close. Nice and smooth and no concerns there. So now we have our opening and closing logic, or I guess animation. But now we want to connect it to the server. So it opens when the player is near the door. So here we have print open the door in our server script. So how can we tell the client to open the door? And I think the easiest approach for this problem here is to use attributes. And if you aren't familiar with what attributes are, they basically let you set custom properties on the door. So what we can do here actually is we can do, let's create a new variable up here called local door is open. And we're going to initialize it to false. And if we find a player that is within our radius, we're going to set it to true. And once we find our player, so like I said, once we find at least one player that is within our radius, we no longer need to check any of these characters anymore. So we can save a bit of processing power there. So in order to stop that checking of extra players, we can just write the word break. And because this is within a for loop, what break does is that it basically tells this loop to stop. We've found what we needed to find, and we don't need to check anything else. And you can imagine that, if this is a 100 player server and you find this person on like player number 3, you don't need to check the other 97 players anymore, right? So you can find, you can get a little bit of performance optimizations here. And then down here, what we can do is we can set the door's open value. So we can say door set attribute open, and then we can set this, I'm going to do a capital O, and we can set it to door is open. So our door is open variable is initialized to false and only gets set to true if there's a person within our radius. And then down here, we set the attribute open to door is open. So if there's a player within the radius, it will be true. And if they aren't in the radius, it will default to false. And then what we can do on the client over here is we can get rid of all of our testing code at the bottom. And what we can do is we can say door get attribute change signal open. And then we can connect to that function, or sorry, event. And then we can say here, door is open, is door get attribute open. And then if the door is open, then open the door, else close the door. So what we're doing here is we're getting a signal or an event every time the door's open attribute changes. So every time open is either set to true or false, this portion of the code will run. So we want to get the current value of that attribute. And if it's set to true, we want to open the door. If it's set to false, we want to close the door. So let's test this out. And now when we walk up to our door, we should see it open when we walk up. So walk up to our door, it opens, and it stays open as long as we're within our radius. And the second we walk away, our door closes. Walk up, open, walk away, close. And so there's one other thing we have to add into this function in our client script to make this feature complete. And so imagine the case a player joins the game and the door is already opened. Right now our code won't open the door if the door should be open when the game starts. So we just want to add in a quick little other method here. Local function door updated. And let's copy all the code that we put in here and let's move it up to here. And rather than having this as its own separate function, we can just tell it to call door updated. So every time our open attribute changes, we connect to it and we call the door updated function. And in order to call this when the game first starts as well, we can just call it manually right before we connect to the event. So now this will run every time open changes and also when the game first starts. So we can make sure the door starts in the right initial state. And because we put the scripts right within our door here, really we can copy and paste this door anywhere within our game now. And if I just run a quick test here, we can see that the doors will all operate independently from each other. So, door 1 opens and they all open on their own, all nice smooth animations. Now, this isn't ideal, right? Because then if you look, what if I wanted to change the speed of this door animation? I find it too slow, I want to change the speed. I don't want to have to change the script in every single one of these doors, right? So what we can do then is we can make this door a package. So right click the door, convert to package, and we can call it automatic door. Make sure you set ownership to whatever game or group you're using. For me, I can just have it on my own account, it's fine. Click submit. And this has made our door into a package. And the neat thing about packages is if I say now copy and paste this door a few times, if I come back to the initial door here and I say, hey, that door kind of opens a bit slow. I want to make it faster. So I want to say so when we do tween info.new, it defaults to a 1 second animation time, but I want to set it to be a ½ second animation time. I want it to open faster. And I think we walk a little bit too close to the door, so I want to change the radius to be 20. And I want this change to affect these other doors in my game, right? So this initial door here, we now see this pencil icon. We can right click publish to package. And now what that's done is that it's updated our package on the Roblox website. And now we see these two green icons next to these other doors in our game. So what we can do then for our other doors is we can right click the door in our Explorer and then click get latest package, and that will automatically update the door as well. We can do that for our other door. So now when we go in to test our game, we'll see our door opens much earlier and faster. And this change has gone to all the other doors in our game as well. So we were able to adjust all the doors in our game, only editing the initial 2 files. So I hope this video was useful. Like I said earlier, if you're interested in getting the source files for this, check out the link in the description. As well, if you need any help with this or any other projects you're working on, check out our Discord server, and the link for that is also in the description.